When someone stabs you in the back and then blames you for bleeding on their knife, death feels like justice. But when you wake up on the same train where your nightmare began, you realize the universe is giving you a chance to rewrite the ending. And this time, you're not playing the hero. My name is Victoria Lang, and I died at 29 on a hospital bed, alone, because the man I'd saved with my own blood chose to hold his lover's hand instead of mine during my final moments. The last thing I heard was Nathan's voice telling Adrian how sorry he was that I'd complicated things for them. How he wished I'd just minded my own business from the beginning. But when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in a morgue or whatever comes after death. I was 22, sitting in seat 4B on the high-speed train from Shanghai to Beijing, watching Nathan Walker stumble down the aisle with blood streaming from his head, about to collapse from a hemorrhage that would kill him without immediate medical intervention. In my previous life, this had been the moment I'd leaped into action. I was a fourth-year medical student then, top of my class, and I'd performed emergency first aid that saved Nathan's life. I'd donated blood during his surgery, visited him every day during his recovery, and helped him through months of rehabilitation. And how had he repaid me? By falling in love with Adrian, the male nurse who'd cared for him during his hospital stay, while simultaneously resenting me for witnessing his vulnerability and making him feel obligated to me. This time, as Nathan swayed dangerously close to my seat, his face pale and his eyes unfocused, I calmly moved my designer purse out of the way and continued reading my magazine. Let someone else play the savior this time. Nathan collapsed 3 seats ahead of me with a sickening thud. The woman sitting next to him screamed. Passengers started panicking, calling for help, asking if anyone had medical training. I turned the page of my magazine and took a sip of my coffee. "Is there a doctor on the train?" someone shouted. "This man is bleeding badly." A businessman tried basic first aid, but clearly had no idea what he was doing. The train conductor rushed over with a first aid kit, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely open it. I watched Nathan's lips turn blue and felt absolutely nothing. "Please," the woman next to Nathan was crying. "Someone help him. I think he's dying." Several people looked around desperately, their eyes scanning the car for anyone who might have medical knowledge. A few gazes landed on me. Perhaps something about my calm demeanor suggested competence, but I kept my expression neutral and my attention on my magazine. Nathan was making choking sounds now, his breathing becoming labored. In my previous life, I would have been on my knees beside him, applying pressure to the wound, keeping his airway clear, talking to him to keep him conscious. This time, I watched him suffer with the same detachment I'd watch a stranger's movie. A college student was trying to follow first aid instructions from a phone app, but she was clearly panicking and making things worse. The conductor was shouting into his radio, but we were still an hour from the next station. "Victoria!" Nathan gasped suddenly, his eyes finding mine across the chaos. "Please help me." Our eyes met, and I saw recognition dawn in his face. Even in his traumatized state, he remembered me. Probably because in our previous timeline, I'd been the face he'd seen when he'd woken up in the hospital. I closed my magazine and stood up slowly. For a moment, hope flickered in Nathan's eyes. Then I stepped over his outstretched hand and walked toward the bathroom. "Excuse me," I said politely to the passengers crowding around Nathan's body. "Could I get through, please?" The look of shock and betrayal in Nathan's eyes as I stepped past him was almost worth the 7 years of heartbreak he'd put me through in our previous life. I locked myself in the bathroom and waited. 10 minutes later, I heard the conductor announcing that they'd managed to stabilize the passenger and were making an emergency stop. Through the small window, I could see ambulance lights flashing as we pulled into a station. When I emerged from the bathroom, Nathan was being loaded onto a stretcher. He was conscious, barely, but I could see the confusion and pain in his eyes as they searched the crowd. He was looking for me, probably wondering if he'd imagined our interaction. I had already collected my things, and was among the first passengers off the train. As I walked past the ambulance, Nathan caught sight of me through the vehicle's open doors. "Victoria," he called weakly. "Wait." I didn't even slow down. By the time I reached my hotel in Beijing, news alerts were already reporting that a passenger had suffered a near-fatal brain hemorrhage on the Shanghai-Beijing Express. The articles mentioned that quick thinking by fellow passengers had saved his life, though he remained in critical condition. I ordered room service and took a long bath, feeling more relaxed than I had in years. 3 days later, I was back in Shanghai preparing for my final medical exams when I received an unexpected visitor. Adrian Kim knocked on my apartment door, looking exactly as beautiful and earnest as I remembered from our previous timeline. "Victoria," he said uncertainly when I opened the door. "I'm Adrian Kim, from Beijing Metropolitan Hospital. I was hoping we could talk." I studied his face, those perfect cheekbones, those soulful eyes that had captivated Nathan so completely in our past life. Adrian was undeniably gorgeous in that delicate, androgynous way that made people want to protect him. "About what?" I asked coolly. "About Nathan Walker," Adrian said. "I'm his nurse, and he's been asking about you constantly since he regained consciousness. He said you were on the train when he collapsed, and he's convinced you could have helped him but chose not to." "And?" I replied. Adrian looked taken aback by my indifference. "And he's devastated. He keeps saying he must have done something terrible to make you hate him so much. The doctors are worried that his emotional distress is affecting his recovery." I almost laughed. Nathan was devastated that someone had treated him with the same callousness he'd shown me? The irony was delicious. "I'm sorry to hear he's struggling," I said with false sympathy. "But I'm not sure why you think this is my problem." "He said you're a medical student," Adrian pressed. "That you would have had the knowledge to help him. He can't understand why you didn't." "Maybe because I'm not obligated to risk my own safety for a stranger," I replied. "Medical knowledge doesn't make me responsible for every emergency I encounter." Adrian's eyes widened. "But he could have died." "People die every day," I said matter-of-factly. "It's unfortunate, but it's not my responsibility to prevent every tragedy I witness." "How can you be so cold?" Adrian asked, genuine shock in his voice. I studied his face, remembering how in our previous timeline, this same man had stood by smugly while Nathan treated me like an inconvenient obligation. Adrian had never once suggested that Nathan should be grateful for my sacrifice. Instead, he'd encouraged Nathan to view my devotion as manipulative and unhealthy. "I'm not cold," I corrected. "I'm realistic. I have my own life to live, my own goals to pursue. I can't be expected to derail my plans every time someone else has an emergency." "But you're studying to be a doctor," Adrian protested. "Isn't helping people supposed to be your calling?" "I'm studying to be a doctor so I can have a successful career," I replied. "Not so I can be everyone's personal savior." Adrian looked like I'd slapped him. In our previous timeline, he'd been attracted to Nathan partly because of the dramatic story of how I'd saved Nathan's life. Adrian had loved the romance of it all. The selfless heroine, the grateful patient, the healing power of love. What Adrian hadn't expected was for Nathan to fall for him instead of me, leaving me as an awkward third wheel in my own rescue story. "Nathan is convinced you saved his life before," Adrian said desperately. "He has these memories, these dreams of you helping him, holding his hand, talking him through surgery prep. The doctors think it might be false memories from the trauma, but he's insistent that you two have met before." I felt a chill run down my spine. Could Nathan somehow remember our previous timeline? "That's impossible," I said carefully. "I've never met Nathan Walker before seeing him on that train." "But you admit you saw him collapse and chose not to help," Adrian pressed. "I admit that I witnessed a medical emergency and made the rational decision not to get involved," I corrected. "It's not my job to save every stranger I encounter." Adrian stared at me for a long moment. "You really feel nothing? No guilt, no empathy, no human compassion?" "I feel relief that it wasn't my problem to solve," I said honestly. After Adrian left, I sat in my apartment thinking about Nathan's supposed memories of our previous life. If he somehow retained fragments of our original timeline, it could complicate my plans to avoid him entirely. But it could also provide opportunities for a different kind of justice. 2 weeks later, I received a handwritten letter delivered to my apartment. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably Nathan's. "Victoria," the letter began. "I don't know why you chose not to help me on the train, but I can't stop thinking about you. I have these strange memories of your voice, your touch, your kindness. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like I owe you something enormous, like you saved my life in some other world or time. The doctors say these feelings might be trauma-related delusions, but they feel more real than anything else in my life right now. Please, I need to see you. I need to understand what's happening to me. I'm being discharged from the hospital next week. Could we meet? Just once? I promise I only want to talk. Nathan. I held the letter for a long time, remembering how in our previous timeline, Nathan had never once written me a letter. He'd barely thanked me for saving his life, treating my sacrifice as if it were something I owed him rather than a gift I'd chosen to give. Now, when I'd done nothing for him, he was begging for my attention. I wrote back, Nathan, I think you're confused about our relationship. We've never met before the train incident, and I have no obligation to help you process your medical trauma. I suggest you speak with your therapist about these false memories. I won't be meeting with you. Please don't contact me again. Victoria. But Nathan didn't give up. Over the next month, I received flowers, chocolates, books, and more letters. Each gift came with a note begging me to give him a chance to explain, to help him understand why he felt so connected to me. The gifts were expensive and thoughtful, clearly chosen by someone who'd put real effort into understanding what I might like. In our previous timeline, Nathan had never given me so much as a birthday card. I threw everything away without opening it. Finally, Nathan showed up at my apartment building. I found him waiting in the lobby when I came home from clinical rotations, looking pale and thin but determined. Victoria, he said, standing up from the chair where he'd been waiting. Please don't run away. I just need 5 minutes. I studied his face, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the way he favored his left side where they'd operated on his brain, the desperate hope in his expression. 5 minutes, I agreed. But we're talking here in the lobby where there are witnesses. Nathan nodded eagerly. Thank you. I know this must seem crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that I know you, that we've been through something together, something important. And what exactly do you think we've been through? I asked. I think you saved my life, Nathan said quietly. Not just recently but before. I have these memories of waking up in a hospital and seeing your face. Of you holding my hand during procedures. Of you visiting me every day and helping me learn to walk again. I kept my expression neutral. Those sound like delusions brought on by your brain injury. Maybe, Nathan admitted. But they feel real. More real than anything else. And in these memories, I hurt you. Badly. I was ungrateful and cruel. And I chose someone else even though you'd given everything for me. My breath caught, but I managed to keep my face impassive. That's quite a detailed delusion. I know how it sounds, Nathan said desperately. But what if it's not a delusion? What if somehow, some way, I really did know you before? What if I really did hurt you, and that's why you wouldn't help me on the train? Even if that were true, I said slowly, what would you want from me now? A chance to make it right, Nathan said immediately. A chance to be the person I should have been. A chance to prove that I'm not the selfish bastard from these memories. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, the desperation to atone for sins he couldn't even prove he'd committed. In our previous timeline, Nathan had never once asked for forgiveness. He'd never acknowledged that his treatment of me was wrong. He'd simply moved on with Adrian, expecting me to fade gracefully into the background. And what about Adrian? I asked. Nathan's face went through several expressions, confusion, realization, something that might have been panic. How do you know about Adrian? He came to see me, I said, trying to guilt me into caring about your recovery. And what did you tell him? That your emotional state wasn't my responsibility. Nathan winced. Did he seem interested in me? Romantically, I mean? I almost smiled. Why do you ask? Because in my memories I fell in love with him instead of. Nathan stopped himself. Instead of who? I pressed. Instead of you, Nathan whispered. In these memories, I fell in love with Adrian and abandoned you. And you deserved so much better. I studied his face, seeing genuine anguish there. And what do you feel for Adrian now? Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Gratitude. He's been kind to me, professional, caring. But when I look at him, all I feel is guilt. Like I'm supposed to love him, but I can't, because I know it would be another betrayal. A betrayal of whom? Of you, Nathan said simply. Even if these memories aren't real, even if you're a stranger who just happened to be on that train, I can't escape the feeling that my heart belongs to you, that it always has. I felt something crack inside my chest, not the desperate love I'd felt for Nathan in our previous life, but something more complex, a mixture of vindication and sadness, and something that might have been pity. Nathan, I said gently, I think you should focus on your recovery and stop chasing fantasies about people who don't want to be found. His face crumpled. So you're saying no? Even after everything I've told you, you're still saying no? I'm saying that I'm not interested in being anyone's second chance at redemption, I replied. Whatever you think you remember, whatever guilt you're carrying, that's your burden to bear. I'm not here to absolve you, or help you work through your trauma. What if I could prove it? Nathan asked suddenly. What if I could prove that these memories are real? How could you possibly do that? Nathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue paper. Because in my memories, you wore this every single day. You told me it was your mother's necklace, the only thing you had left of her. He unwrapped the tissue to reveal a delicate silver chain with a small pendant, a moon and star design that had belonged to my mother. I hadn't worn that necklace in this timeline. I'd kept it locked away in my jewelry box, too painful to look at because it reminded me of all the times Nathan had dismissively told me it looked cheap. But in our previous timeline, I had worn it every day. I told him the story about my mother on one of his bad days in the hospital, trying to distract him from his pain. Where did you get that? I whispered. I bought it 3 days ago, Nathan said. I saw it in a vintage jewelry shop and I knew that you were supposed to have it. The shop owner said it was from the 1960s, that it had belonged to someone's mother who passed away young. I stared at the necklace, my hands trembling. That's impossible. Is it? Nathan asked softly. Or is it proof that somehow, someway we've done this dance before? I looked up at him, seeing hope and fear warring in his expression. Even if that were true, I said slowly, it doesn't change anything. You said yourself that in these memories, you hurt me. You chose someone else. You abandoned me. Why would I want to repeat that experience? Because this time I know better, Nathan said urgently. This time I know what I'd be giving up. This time I know that what I had with you was real love, and what I thought I wanted with Adrian was just gratitude and confusion and fear of intimacy. And how do I know you won't change your mind again the moment someone more attractive comes along? Nathan stepped closer, his eyes intense. Because I've seen what happens when I'm that stupid. I've lived with the consequences, even if only in dreams. I know now that losing you was the worst mistake of my life. I stood there holding the necklace, feeling the weight of possibility and danger in equal measure. I need time to think, I said finally. How much time? As much as I need. Nathan nodded, though I could see the desperation in his eyes. Just, please don't disappear again. Please don't make me wonder for the rest of my life what could have been. I won't disappear, I promised. But I also won't be rushed into anything. After Nathan left, I sat in my apartment staring at the necklace for hours. The rational part of my mind insisted that it was just a coincidence, that Nathan had somehow intuited what kind of jewelry I'd like and gotten lucky with his choice. But the pendant was exactly like my mother's necklace. Not just similar, but identical down to the tiny scratch on the star where I dropped it as a child. That night, I called my best friend Emma, the only person I'd ever told about my feelings for Nathan in our previous timeline. Emma, I said when she answered, this is going to sound crazy, but I need to ask you something. Have you ever had dreams that felt more real than your actual life? What kind of dreams? Emma asked carefully. Dreams where you lived through experiences that never actually happened, but they felt completely authentic. Where you had relationships with people you've never met, but you knew everything about them. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Victoria, are you okay? You sound strange. I'm fine, I said quickly. I'm just working through some things. Is this about that guy Nathan who's been sending you flowers? The one from the train. How do you know about Nathan? Because he called me, Emma said. Yesterday. He said he got my number from your emergency contact form at the hospital, and he wanted to ask me about you. What did he ask? Weird things, Emma said. He wanted to know if you'd ever mentioned having dreams about past lives, or if you'd ever talked about feeling like you'd lived through the same experiences twice. He seemed convinced that you two had some kind of connection that predated your actual meeting. I felt my heart start racing. What did you tell him? I told him he sounded delusional and that he should leave you alone, Emma said firmly. Victoria, this guy is clearly unstable. First he has false memories about you saving his life. Now he's calling your friends asking about past lives? You need to stay away from him. What if they're not false memories? I asked quietly. What? What if somehow, some way, Nathan and I really did know each other before? What if we really did go through everything he thinks we went through? Emma was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Emma. Victoria, she said carefully. I think you need to talk to someone. A professional. This kind of thinking, it's not healthy. You don't believe in things like past lives or parallel timelines? I believe in medical explanations for psychological phenomena, Emma said firmly. And what you're describing sounds like you're both experiencing some kind of shared delusion, possibly brought on by trauma. What trauma? For him, the brain injury. For you, maybe survivor's guilt about not helping him on the train. I hung up the phone feeling more confused than ever. Over the next week, I found myself thinking about Nathan constantly. Not the desperate, lovesick obsession I'd felt in our previous timeline, but something more complex. A mixture of curiosity, vindication, and something that might have been genuine affection for this version of Nathan, who seemed to understand the magnitude of what he'd lost. I started researching cases of people who claimed to remember past lives or alternate timelines. Most of the literature dismissed such claims as fantasy or delusion, but there were a few documented cases that defied easy explanation. More importantly, I found myself testing Nathan's supposed memories in small ways. I wore different perfumes around my apartment building to see if he'd recognize the scent I'd worn in our previous timeline. I left books I'd mentioned liking in our past life on the lobby table to see if he'd noticed them. Every test came back positive. Nathan noticed everything, recognized details he couldn't possibly know unless he really did remember our previous life together. Finally, I agreed to meet him for coffee. Thank you, Nathan said when I sat down across from him at the small cafe near my apartment. I know this must be difficult for you. What makes you think this is difficult for me? I asked. Because you loved me, Nathan said simply. In whatever timeline or reality we shared before, you loved me completely, and I threw that love away for something that was never real. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but all I saw was genuine remorse. Tell me about Adrian, I said. Nathan's face fell. What do you want to know? In these memories of yours, what was your relationship with him like? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Intense, passionate, built on gratitude and guilt, and a kind of desperation that I mistook for love. And with me, steady, comfortable, built on genuine understanding and shared experiences. Nathan looked up at me. I thought what I had with Adrian was more exciting because it felt more dangerous. I didn't understand that what I had with you was more valuable because it felt more real. And now I understand the difference between infatuation and love, Nathan said. Now I know that excitement isn't the same thing as connection. What about Adrian's feelings? I pressed. In your memories, did he love you? Nathan considered this. I think Adrian loved the idea of me, the dramatic romance of falling for a patient, the fantasy of healing someone with love. But I don't think he ever really knew me. And you think I do? I think you're the only person who's ever really known me, Nathan said quietly. Even now, when you're angry with me and have every right to be, you see me more clearly than anyone else ever has. I took a sip of my coffee, considering my next words carefully. Nathan, let's say for the sake of argument that these memories are real. Let's say we really did live through another timeline where I saved your life and you broke my heart. What makes you think this time would be any different? Because this time I know what I'm choosing, Nathan said immediately. This time I'm not confused about gratitude versus love, or obligation versus desire. This time I know that you're not trying to trap me or manipulate me or make me feel guilty. You've made it very clear that you don't need me or want me, and paradoxically, that's exactly what makes me sure that what I feel for you is real. Explain. In my memories, I resented you partly because I felt like I owed you something I could never repay. I felt trapped by your sacrifice, guilty that I couldn't love you the way you deserved. Nathan leaned forward. But this time, you don't want anything from me. You've made it clear that you're perfectly happy without me, which means that any feelings I have for you now are genuine, not born out of obligation or guilt. I had to admit, there was a certain logic to that. And what about my feelings? I asked. In your memories, how did I feel when you chose Adrian over me? Nathan's face crumpled. Devastated. Betrayed. Like I'd stolen 7 years of your life and given you nothing in return. And you think I should risk feeling that way again? I think you should trust that I've learned from my mistakes, Nathan said. I think you should believe that someone who's been given a second chance at the most important relationship of his life wouldn't be stupid enough to waste it again. I stared at him for a long moment, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the desperate hope, the genuine remorse for crimes he couldn't even prove he'd committed. I need more time, I said finally. I'll wait, Nathan said immediately. However long you need. Even if I decide the answer is no? Even then, Nathan said. You don't owe me anything, Victoria. Not your forgiveness, not your love, not a second chance. If you decide I don't deserve any of those things, I'll accept that decision and stop bothering you. And Adrian? What about him? Are you going to tell him about these memories? About your feelings for me? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Adrian deserves to know the truth. He's been nothing but kind to me, and it wouldn't be fair to let him develop feelings for someone who can't return them. That seems wise. Victoria, Nathan said as I stood to leave. In my memories, I never told you that I loved you. Not once in 7 years. I took your love for granted and never gave you the words you deserved to hear. And I want you to know that I love you, Nathan said simply. Even if these memories are delusions, even if we've never met before that train, even if you never speak to me again after today, I love you. You deserve to hear that from someone, and I wish I'd been smart enough to say it when it might have mattered. I walked home feeling like my entire worldview had been turned upside down. That evening, I called Emma again. I had coffee with Nathan today. I told her, Victoria, please tell me you're not getting involved with this guy. Emma, what if he's telling the truth? What if somehow we really did live through another timeline together? Then you'd both be certifiably insane, Emma said bluntly. Victoria, listen to yourself. You're talking about past lives and alternate realities. This is not normal thinking. But what if normal thinking isn't adequate to explain what we're experiencing? What you're experiencing is trauma bonding with someone who's clearly mentally unstable. He's not unstable, I interrupted. He's actually remarkably self-aware and emotionally intelligent. He understands exactly what he did wrong in these memories, and he's taking full responsibility for it. Victoria, you're scaring me, Emma said. This is not how you normally think or talk. It's like this guy has completely changed your personality. Maybe he's changed my perspective, I said. Maybe he's helped me see possibilities I never considered before. Or maybe he's manipulating you into believing in a fantasy that makes you feel special and important, Emma countered. Victoria, think about this logically. What's more likely? That you and this stranger somehow lived through an alternate timeline together, or that you're both experiencing psychological symptoms that make you feel connected to each other? I hung up the phone feeling frustrated and confused. The next day, I made a decision that surprised even me. I went to Beijing Metropolitan Hospital to see Adrian. I found him in the pediatric ward, reading to a group of sick children. He looked up when I approached, his face registering surprise and wariness. Victoria, he said, standing up. I wasn't expecting to see you here. We need to talk, I said. About Nathan. Adrian's face went through several expressions. Okay, let me finish with the children, and we can talk in the break room. 20 minutes later, we sat across from each other in the small staff break room, both of us holding cups of terrible hospital coffee. Nathan told me he spoke with you, Adrian said carefully. About his memories? About his feelings for you, Adrian corrected. He said he couldn't pursue a relationship with me because his heart belongs to someone else. I studied Adrian's face, seeing hurt and confusion there, but also something else, relief? How do you feel about that? I asked. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Honestly, part of me is relieved. Why? Because I've been feeling guilty about my feelings for Nathan, Adrian admitted. He's been my patient, and even though he's discharged now, it still feels ethically questionable. And there was something about his attachment to me that felt intense in an unhealthy way. What do you mean? He was grateful, but it was more than gratitude. It was like he was desperate to feel something for me, like he was trying to force himself to fall in love with me because he thought he was supposed to. I felt something click into place. And that made you uncomfortable? It made me feel like I was taking advantage of someone who was vulnerable and confused, Adrian said. Nathan is a good man, but he's been through serious trauma. I wasn't sure if his feelings for me were real, or if they were just a response to his medical situation. And now I think he's found clarity, Adrian said. When he told me about you, he seemed more at peace than I'd seen him since his accident. Like he'd finally figured out something that had been bothering him. I took a sip of my coffee, thinking about how different this conversation was from what I'd expected. Adrian, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you believe in things like past lives or alternate timelines? Adrian's eyebrows went up. That's a very specific question. Nathan has these memories of living through experiences with me that never actually happened. At least, not in this timeline. He's convinced that somehow we knew each other before, that we had a relationship that ended badly, and that he's been given a second chance to make things right. And what do you think? I think either we're both experiencing some kind of shared psychological phenomenon, or something impossible is actually happening. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. In my culture, we have stories about people whose souls are connected across multiple lifetimes. The idea that love can transcend death, and time isn't foreign to me. But do you actually believe it? I believe that there are things in this universe that science can't explain yet, Adrian said carefully. I've seen too many unexplainable things in hospitals to dismiss anything as completely impossible. Such as patients who wake up from comas with knowledge they shouldn't have. Families who feel the moment their loved one dies, even when they're hundreds of miles away. People who recover from terminal illnesses with no medical explanation. Adrian shrugged. Maybe consciousness is more complex than we understand. Maybe love really can survive beyond individual lifetimes. You don't think we're both delusional? I think you're both experiencing something real, even if I can't explain what that something is, Adrian said. And I think Nathan's feelings for you are the most genuine emotions I've seen from him since his accident. What makes you say that? Because when he talks about you, he doesn't sound like a patient trying to process trauma, Adrian said. He sounds like a man who's found his way home. That evening, I sat in my apartment with my mother's necklace in my hands, thinking about everything Adrian had said. If someone as rational and grounded as Adrian could accept the possibility that Nathan and I had shared experiences beyond this timeline, maybe I was the one being unreasonable by rejecting it. I thought about the 7 years I'd given Nathan in our previous life, and how he'd never once looked at me the way he'd been looking at me in our recent conversations. I thought about how desperately I'd wanted him to love me the way he'd loved Adrian, and how it had felt to be someone's second choice, someone's obligation, someone's burden. But this Nathan was different. This Nathan looked at me like I was a miracle he'd never expected to receive. This Nathan spoke to me like I was the most important person in his world, not someone he was stuck with out of guilt. This Nathan loved me the way I'd always dreamed of being loved. The question was, did I have the courage to risk my heart on someone who'd already broken it once, even if he didn't remember doing it? I made my decision the next morning. I called Nathan and asked him to meet me at the same cafe, where we'd had coffee before. "I've been thinking about everything you've told me," I said when he sat down across from me. "And I've made a decision." Nathan's face went through hope and terror in equal measure. "And I'm willing to try," I said. "But with conditions." "Anything." "First, I want complete honesty. If you start developing feelings for someone else, if you start questioning your feelings for me, if you start feeling trapped or obligated, I want to know immediately. I won't be anyone's consolation prize again." "Again?" Nathan asked, picking up on my word choice. "In your memories," I clarified quickly. "I won't be anyone's consolation prize the way I apparently was in your memories." "You were never a consolation prize," Nathan said firmly. "You were the prize I was too stupid to recognize." "Second condition," I continued. "We take this slowly. No rushing into anything, no grand romantic gestures, no dramatic declarations. If this is real, it will survive a cautious approach." "Agreed." Third condition. If at any point I decide this isn't working, you accept that decision without argument. No begging, no pleading, no trying to change my mind. Just acceptance. Nathan nodded. "And what about my condition?" "You have a condition?" "Just one," Nathan said. "Let me prove to you every single day that you made the right choice. Let me show you what it looks like when someone loves you the way you deserve to be loved." I felt my carefully constructed walls crack slightly. "That's not a condition, that's a promise." "Then consider it both." We started slowly as I'd requested. Coffee dates, walks in the park, long conversations about everything and nothing. Nathan was patient, attentive, and completely focused on me in a way that felt both foreign and perfect. He remembered things I mentioned in passing: my favorite tea, my dislike of crowded restaurants, my love of old movies. He asked thoughtful questions about my medical studies, my future plans, my dreams and fears. He treated every moment with me like a gift he'd never expected to receive. Most importantly, he never once made me feel like I owed him anything. 3 weeks into our careful courtship, Nathan brought up Adrian again. "I need to tell you something," he said as we sat by the lake near my apartment. "Adrian asked me out yesterday." I felt my stomach drop. And I told him I was seeing someone," Nathan said. "I told him I was completely committed to you and that nothing would change that." "How did he take it?" "Better than I expected," Nathan said. "He said he'd suspected as much from the way I talked about you. He wished us both well." "That's very mature of him." "It is," Nathan agreed. "But Victoria, I need you to know that even if you hadn't agreed to try with me, I still wouldn't have pursued anything with Adrian. These feelings I have for you, they're not going away. They're not conditional on whether you return them." I studied his face, seeing nothing but sincerity there. "That's a dangerous way to love someone," I said. "It's the only way I know how to love you," Nathan replied. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself falling for this version of Nathan in ways I'd never fallen for the original. This Nathan was emotionally available, grateful for my attention rather than resentful of it, and completely devoted to making me happy. But I was also waiting for the other shoe to drop. For Nathan to grow bored with me, or to meet someone more exciting, or to decide that his memories were delusions after all. The test came 6 months into our relationship, when Adrian was involved in a car accident. Nathan rushed to the hospital the moment he heard, and I went with him. We spent hours in the waiting room while Adrian underwent surgery for internal injuries. I watched Nathan carefully, looking for signs that seeing Adrian in danger would reawaken old feelings. In our previous timeline, Nathan's love for Adrian had been partly built on his need to be someone's hero, his attraction to emotional drama and intensity. But this Nathan held my hand in the waiting room, and showed concern for Adrian as a friend, nothing more. "Are you okay?" I asked him as we waited for news. "I'm worried about Adrian," Nathan said. "But I'm not. I don't feel what I thought I would feel." "What did you think you would feel?" In my memories, Adrian was this larger-than-life figure, this perfect person I'd thrown away everything for. Nathan squeezed my hand. "But seeing him now, I realize he's just a good man who deserves to be happy. I care about him, but I'm not in love with him. I never really was." "What were you in love with then?" "The idea of him," Nathan said. The fantasy of being saved by love, of having someone make all my pain go away. But that's not love, it's escapism. And with me? Nathan turned to look at me fully. With you, I'm in love with reality. With who you actually are, not who I need you to be. With your strength and your intelligence and your refusal to let me use you as an emotional crutch. When Adrian woke up from surgery, Nathan was kind and supportive, but clearly there as a friend. Adrian, for his part, seemed genuinely happy to see Nathan with me. Like he'd always known this was how things were supposed to be. Take care of him, Adrian told me as we prepared to leave the hospital. He's been through a lot, but he's a good man underneath all the confusion. I will, I promised. And Nathan? Adrian called out as we reached the door. Yeah. You made the right choice, Adrian said with a smile. You two belong together in a way we never did. That night, as Nathan and I lay together in his apartment, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me for months. Nathan, what if these memories of yours are real? What if we really did live through all of this before? What do you mean? I mean, what if I have memories too? I said quietly. What if I remember saving your life on that train, and spending 7 years loving you while you loved someone else, and dying alone because you chose Adrian over me even at the very end? Nathan went very still. Do you? I remember everything, I whispered. I remember the surgery, the recovery, the way you looked at Adrian like he was the sun and you were a planet orbiting around him. I remember how it felt to love you desperately while knowing I'd never be enough. Victoria. I remember dying in that hospital bed while you held Adrian's hand instead of mine. I continued. I remember thinking that I'd wasted my entire life on someone who saw me as an obligation. Nathan sat up, his face stricken. If you remember all of that, why did you give me a second chance? Because this version of you is everything I wished you could be in our first life, I said simply. This version of you loves me the way I always dreamed of being loved. This version of you sees me, values me, chooses me. But knowing what you know about how badly I hurt you before, knowing what I know about how much better it could be, I interrupted. Nathan, in our first life, I spent 7 years trying to earn your love. In this life, you've spent every day trying to earn mine. Do you understand the difference? Nathan pulled me close, and I could feel him trembling. I'm so sorry, he whispered. For everything I put you through, for every day I was too blind to see what I had, for dying without ever telling you that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. You're telling me now, I said. I love you, Nathan said. Not because I owe you, not because I feel guilty, not because you saved my life. I love you because you're brilliant and strong and beautiful, and because being with you feels like coming home. I love you too, I said. This version of you, the version who fights for us instead of fighting against us. What happens now? Nathan asked. Now we build something new, I said. Something better than what we had before. Something worthy of the second chance we've been given. 2 years later, Nathan proposed to me on the anniversary of the day we'd met on the train. He chose a simple ring, nothing flashy or dramatic, and asked me in the quiet of our shared apartment rather than making a public spectacle. Victoria, he said, getting down on one knee. In whatever timeline this is, in whatever reality we're living, I want to spend the rest of it loving you the way you deserve to be loved. Will you marry me? Yes, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Our wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family, with Adrian serving as one of Nathan's groomsmen. In his toast, Adrian said, I've never seen two people who were more clearly meant to find each other, no matter how many lifetimes it took. Emma, who had eventually come around to accepting our relationship, though she still thought we were both slightly crazy, was my maid of honor. I don't understand your love story, she said in her toast, but I understand that it's real, and that's what matters. After the ceremony, as Nathan and I danced to our first song as husband and wife, he whispered in my ear, Do you think we'll remember this in our next life? I think true love finds a way to transcend everything, I replied. Even death, even time, even our own stupidity. Then I'll find you again, Nathan promised. In every lifetime, in every reality, I'll find you and I'll love you better than I did before. You won't need to find me, I said. This time, we're getting it right. 5 years into our marriage, Nathan and I were expecting our first child when we received news that Adrian had been killed in a climbing accident. We were devastated for our friend, but also struck by the strange symmetry of it all. In our first timeline, Adrian lived and I died loving him, Nathan said as we sat in our garden, my hand resting on my growing belly. In this timeline, I lived and learned to love you properly, and Adrian got to see us happy before he died. Do you think he's at peace? I asked. I think he always was, Nathan said. I think Adrian understood love in a way I didn't back then. He never would have been happy with someone who was settling for him. And now I understand that love isn't about drama or intensity or proving yourself worthy, Nathan said. It's about choosing someone every single day, even when it's not exciting, even when it's hard, even when they've seen you at your worst and decided to stay anyway. Is that what you're doing with me? Choosing me. Every day, Nathan said, kissing my forehead. In every timeline, in every reality, in every possible version of our story, I choose you. Our daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday morning, and she had Nathan's eyes and my stubborn streak. We named her Hope, because that's what she represented. Proof that even broken things could be made whole, that even the worst mistakes could be redeemed, that love really could conquer time and memory and regret. As I held our baby and watched Nathan's face transform with wonder and devotion, I thought about the version of myself who had died alone in a hospital bed, convinced that love was about sacrifice and suffering. That version of me had been wrong. Love wasn't about giving up pieces of yourself until nothing remained. Love was about becoming more yourself than you'd ever been before, because someone saw you clearly and chose you anyway. Thank you, I whispered to Nathan as he cradled our daughter. For what? For fighting for us this time, I said. For not giving up on us before we even had a chance to begin. Thank you for giving me the chance to get it right, Nathan replied. Years later, when people asked us how we'd known we were meant to be together, Nathan would smile and say, sometimes you just recognize home when you find it, even if you've never been there before. And I would add, sometimes love is about getting a second chance to be the people you were always supposed to be. We never spoke publicly about our shared memories of another timeline, another life where things had gone so terribly wrong. But sometimes, late at night when we were both unable to sleep, we would whisper about it, about the lesson we'd learned, about the gift we'd been given, about the love that had been strong enough to survive even death and time. Do you ever regret it? I asked Nathan one night as we lay in bed, our children sleeping safely down the hall. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd chosen differently on that train? You mean if you'd saved me again and we'd repeated the same patterns? Yes. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. I think we would have been miserable, he said finally. I would have resented you for saving me. You would have resented me for not appreciating it. And we would have destroyed each other all over again. So you're glad I walked away? I'm glad you forced me to save myself, Nathan said. I'm glad you refused to enable my selfishness. I'm glad you made me earn your love instead of just expecting it. I'm glad to, I said. In our first life, I thought love meant sacrifice. Now I know love means choice. What's the difference? Sacrifice is about giving up who you are for someone else, I said. Choice is about becoming who you're meant to be with someone else. And who are we meant to be? I thought about our life together. The challenges we'd faced, the growth we'd achieved, the family we'd built, the love we'd cultivated like a garden, tending it carefully and watching it flourish. Happy, I said simply. We're meant to be happy. And we were. Against all odds, despite all the ways we'd failed each other in another life, despite all the reasons it shouldn't have worked, we were happy. Sometimes second chances come in the form of time travel, or memory, or impossible coincidences that feel like magic. Sometimes they come in the form of someone loving you enough to refuse to save you, forcing you to learn to save yourself. Our second chance had come in the form of a train, a moment of choice, and the courage to rewrite a story that had ended in tragedy. But the real magic wasn't in the impossible circumstance of our rebirth. The real magic was in what we'd chosen to do with the gift we'd been given. We'd chosen each other, every single day, in every single way that mattered. And that choice had made all the difference.